to Wealthwise, a brand new podcast presented by Soaring Prophets Media, sponsored by Quantum Insurance. I am Patrick from Soaring Prophets Media, and I am joined by my fantastic co-host, Jennifer Burnham-Grubbs of Quantum Insurance. Folks, this is our first podcast episode of Wealthwise, and we're super excited to have you. I'm going to take a little bit more of a practical view than I sometimes do on my other financial show, talking about practical experience to create and generate generational wealth. We're going to have great conversations. And Jennifer, what are you doing? What are we doing here?
I'm here to keep you in check, Patrick. I'm here to make sure that you don't screw it up. Now, I'm here to actually, I like that you said a practical view, because I like to be a very practical person. And I think I'm here to sort of clear away some of the cobwebs that people would like us to all be thinking with about finance, and just get down to the nitty gritty. I love to talk nitty gritty, and I love to be wealthwise. So we're going to have real conversations with real points of view, sort of unfiltered. So be careful, watch out, fasten your seatbelts, and get ready to grow.
Well, we're super excited about this. This has been a project that we've been working on for a while. Jennifer's joined me on my financial fitness show and with the Soaring Prophets Media brand. And this was a marriage that it should have happened a long time ago. We're a little late to the party. So Jennifer, thank you so much for doing this with me. I'm super excited to get here. But I digress. We're getting away. We're doing all the pleasantries. I know it's our first show.
Cut out the pleasantries, Patrick.
Right. Get right to it, eh? So what's going on in the market? The last couple of weeks, we've had the CPI report that's come out. However you want to look at this, our market currently is sort of an odd place to be. You're dealing with individuals and how they're looking at generationally creating and maintaining their wealth. What are you hearing? What are you seeing? What's happening in the world right now?
Oh, it's such a wacky time. And first of all, we've kind of broke the model, right? Nothing has existed like this quite before. You've got really high interest. You've got really low unemployment. The Fed in the US, at least, has so much debt. So I was thinking about that this morning. The Fed right now, the US Fed, 98 cents of every dollar in taxes that United States citizens pay is going towards interest on its own debt. And there was an article that came out in Bloomberg that by the year 2030, it's going to be 117 cents of every dollar in taxes is going to go towards interest on the US debt. So they can't say it, but I'm sure they're freaking out that interest rates are that high, because their own debt is actually suffering from that interest rate. So they don't want these interest rates that high either. And yet, because of the little pickle we found ourselves in, where money was so free 5 years ago, that inflation got run away, we're kind of like, how do we stop this train that has no brakes and try to create a soft landing? So it's kind of interesting. And then meanwhile, you have stocks that are sort of bipolar or manic depressive and in their manic phase right now.
Well, see, I love the way you put that. Is this a little pickle that we're in, about $30 trillion pickle? We're trying to figure out what that looks like. But it is so true. We find ourselves in this really weird position. So, let's get a little bit specific, because that's what everyone's here to know. But we're going to dive into some of the facts. We're going to try to meander through a lot of the BS that's out there. And we don't want to just be a couple talking heads. We want to give you some real truth that's going along in the market. And, we see the consumer price index. And for those of you guys are all savvy investors, you're consumers, you're buying things, you're selling things, you have a portfolio out there. But the consumer price index is based on a basket of goods that the Federal Reserve monitors. So that might be mayonnaise. What's the price of mayonnaise done in the last 5 years? What's it done in the last month? Those sorts of things. And the consumer price index continues to go up. This is inflationary. We're seeing that. On the flip side of that, a few days later, we had the producer price index. That's the guy that's making the mayonnaise. Has his eggs gone down in price? What's that looking like? And we saw the consumer pricing up. We saw the producer price falling. And that's an odd scenario. That's a weird situation to be in. Inflation should be continuing to inflate on both sides of the coin. If you are having your consumer paying more for your goods, therefore you can pass that on to the producer, because it's a commodity. Eggs, steel, copper, oil, you have these commodity ranges that end up. But we're seeing that the producers, they can't charge as much. That's a hedge of what's coming on the consumer side. And we're seeing, out of the University of Michigan, the consumer sentiment reports that are flying out right now, we are seeing the consumer weakening. So you have inflation maintaining and continuing to ratchet up slightly. We have the consumer weakening. That, to me, and again, I missed this day at Federal Reserve Institution School, but that's stagflation. Yet when we go to the chairman, Jerome Powell, he's saying, I don't see the stag and I don't see the inflation. To me, that's scary.
It hasn't hit the fan yet, I think. I think that, credit card utilization is higher and higher and higher every month right now. More and more people are defaulting. And I think what's happening is consumers have been trying to be the good old capitalist consumers that they've been for a really long time. But with money being so expensive to borrow and money tightening, they're getting to the point where there's like only so much debt that they can carry before they start completely defaulting. And that's the only thing, by the way, that's forcing Target and Starbucks to lower their prices just a little bit. I do, as you know, I guess I'm a proletariat at the bottom of things, because I'm just like, shame on you, Target and Starbucks, like shame on you. But here's the thing, Patrick, why they have to have their prices so high is because they have so much constant pressure for their stocks to be up quarter after quarter after quarter, which is an unrealistic model. Nothing goes up indefinitely forever. And by creating that expectation, we're creating the need for everything to only be going forward rather than being able to have cyclical, sort of healthy, grounded cycles that make sense, that there's time for things to restore and replenish. And I think part of that is there's just so much panic about the stock market because people know that things are higher than they should be. I mean, everyone knows that Elon just got paid, what was it, $60 billion, right?
Like a rounding error, like 56.
56. Sorry.
Like that's just a rounding error. Accounting will probably round that off, $4 billion. Who knows?
Yeah. And his little stock and maybe 6 others like NVIDIA, are like the only things carrying the stock market right now. Because and then maybe if you want to go look at your charts now is a great time to look at it. If you break it down, this is all we keep talking about is the under the surface trends that you and I can see, that we can experience, that I don't know if it's Wall Street and the Fed don't want to see it, or they see it, they can't say it because they'll create panic. I'm not sure which it is, but there's what we can see happening and when we know. And then the question after we look at this is going to be, well, how do you try to hedge against that? What do you do to protect 100%. Yourself in this environment?
Well, I think you're exactly right. So James, you've thrown this up here. So this is the NASDAQ, right? Let me pull this because I'm in full screen mode. Sorry, guys. So this is the NASDAQ. This is following the tech sector, more or less. And, we have seen a parabolic move since November. Slight pullback here in April, nothing. But you have to remember, this is following a basket of stocks that is very tech heavy. The S&P 500 right now is a basket of stocks that has become super tech heavy. You brought up a name, Jennifer, NVIDIA. NVIDIA has been the playboy for the last 18 months. And, we saw it become worth more than Apple last week, right? This is a stock that is currently trading 55 times earnings. This is crazy. The problem is, Jennifer, if you are a manager, a fund manager, you can't not own it. You can't put your clients in a position where you're not benefiting from this, or you're going to have their money ripped out of your planning and off to somebody else who will. The problem is that we have pensions, like teachers' pensions, cops' pensions, cities' pensions, all of these pension plans that are just in indices tracking funds. What happens when NVIDIA misses their first earnings? And you talked about it before, the law of large numbers. You can only continue beating earnings by 100% for so long. And then it gets so big, like where we are now, over $3 trillion of a otherwise, $500 billion company a year ago, 55 times earnings. You can't keep beating by 100%. There's going to be a time where they're going to miss earnings.
You're terrifying me as I think about this, because it's like the pressure to continue to create unrealistic deliverables.
Right.
And it ends up being played out in even more massive scale at the very largest companies. So it's kind of like Transformers, these giant companies that have to be able to give Elon $60 billion and somehow still the stock's supposed to go up the next day.
Right.
How's that money going to come out of nowhere? But these expectations are so high. And do you know what happens? That leads to a lot of dirty deals, and I honestly think this is, I hate to say this, but part of the reason that Trump is gaining so much power right now here in the US is I just read an article that many of the titans on Wall Street are pledging to get behind him because he's just promising them that he's going to try to help loosen monetary policy, which is the only way that they're able to continue creating these inflated numbers. And so he's getting backing as a result of this kind of constant, hyper performative, but no actual rooted in reality, real performance value, which what that leads to eventually, one way or other, Patrick, is a crash at some point.
Yes.
Yeah.
We have to. Again, law of large numbers. We've explained that concept. That's a thing. The stock, the chart that I pulled up here is the Russell 2000, iShares Russell 2000 ETF. So this is following the 2,000 other publicly traded companies that are on the market. These are what are called small cap companies, folks. This looks very different than this. What do we notice? We notice no consolidation in the NASDAQ versus where we are in the Russell 2000. This is the average company. So we talk about breadth of a market, and a healthy market should see both of these markets moving in roughly the same direction. If everything was great, the NASDAQ, the Russell, the Dow, all of these indices would be moving in lockstep together, right? We're not seeing that. We're seeing massive divergences. And like you were saying earlier, we had the Magnificent Seven. We're sorted down to, the disheveled three.
Disheveled three.
Right? Like it's in this weird dynamic that we have going on right now. But like you're saying, there always is, and I was very young in the .com, and I have been researching the .com bubble because there are so many similarities to what I see now. You don't have pets.com anymore, right? We've sort of moved through that, where just because you have .com on the end of your name, you're not getting a valuation that's gone crazy. But what we are seeing is any company that can qualify as AI.
Oh yeah.
Like Apple comes out last week. God bless you. I'm an Apple guy. My entire house runs off of Apple. Okay. And Siri, when you say that name, I get shivers because I go, it's useless. It's awful. They come out last week and they're now partnering with OpenAI, with ChatGPT, and somehow that was enough to pump the stock 15% in a week. We're not talking about a small cap company where that's, a couple $1 billion. That's like $750 billion in a week.
You're scaring me because, and I don't mean to keep saying this guy is not, I'm only scared because I feel like people aren't thinking about this. And if we do anything right here, it's to help more people think, on this show together. So this whole fascination and love affair with AI, I think people don't understand. I actually have dear friends that work in AI at Google. Okay.
Right.
And there are no reins on this right now. It is untethered. The whole thing is completely untethered. So everybody falling in love with it, like, oh, it's going to be great. It's going to be the future. What they don't realize is that jumping on this bandwagon with this much excitement and then jumping on the stock's bad. If you're AI adjacent, then we're hoping that we're going to get NVIDIA results. And so now that's why we're excited again about that. There are no rails on this. And what it can really do is create chaos and or a lack of jobs all over the world in a lot of different sectors. So people who are so excited and just short-sighted around this one thing, oh, it might make my stock go up. I think people need to find a way to be grounding. And one of the themes that we keep talking about or asking ourselves, that if you know that there's a little bit of hype, there's a little bit of overexcitement, there's a little bit of lack of long-term thinking going on in many different sectors, in politics and finance and everything else. How do we as critical thinkers get wealthwise and hedge against that, right? So some people are buying gold, some people are buying silver, some people are buying Bitcoin as their way to hedge. Some people are big into bonds, right? See, these aren't.
Some are buying GameStop.
Right? How do you, though, as an independent thinker, try to hedge between capturing some of the high highs that are there, but anticipating that those can't go forever because they're kind of going to head off a cliff? There's just not really much question about how, right? Or it's a question of when maybe and how, but not whether, I guess I should say. And then what can you do to keep the seatbelt or the strap on the harness for yourself in terms of not only being on that bandwagon, and what tools are available for that. So that's what I always like to think about.
Well, the first thing for me is to make sure that you're tuning into Wealthwise on Thursday afternoon.
Absolutely. You're right.
You're getting those tidbits of knowledge.
Yeah.
That is probably the number one way of hedging against the downfall of the economy right now. But zing. But no, I do. I think that goes to exactly what you're talking about. We were talking about Elon earlier. We were talking about GameStop here just a second ago. We have seen this oligarchy of massive $56 billion being handed to shareholders. We are going through this never before in history divulsion. How's the best way to put this? We have never seen retail investors so quickly hand their money over to multi billionaires and do it with a smile. Yeah. We've never seen this in the history. This is uncharted. We look at Roaring Kitty, the meme stock fiasco, Elon with $56 billion, Apple. Like, again, Apple comes out and says, Siri's going to be a part of the AI revolution. Siri has sucked for 10 years. Like, I don't know what changes tomorrow. I watched it. I watched their launch. I'm really excited that it's going to be able to pick out a picture of me with my cat. I don't see where we add $1 trillion in market cap the next day. But we have never seen in the history of the market go through a process where we are so willing to hand over our hard-earned capital as retail investors that we have right now. GameStop, Roaring Kitty puts a meme out on Twitter and posts, and we see a $70 billion valuation. GameStop is a bankrupt company.
I think you remind me of something. Like, I was born before FOMO was a thing.
Right.
And honestly, I was like one of those boomers that really heard FOMO. I was like, what is that? I had to look it up. I had to Google it because I think that drives quite a bit. We saw it when we had NFTs, and it was like, the hype around NFTs, and suddenly people are buying these NFTs because of FOMO. And it was a bubble that wasn't connected to real value yet. Now, I believe we'll talk about NFTs on another show. And I think that with especially AI and everything, we're going to be there eventually. But a lot of people are hearing buzzwords and wanting to jump because of buzzwords, as opposed to understanding how to connect things to the actual value. And by the way, about handing money over to these oligarchs and handing money over to Tesla stock and all these other things, it's really silly to be doing that when interest rates now are 5% on a CD. You can get a consistent 5% and not lose your money simply by using other tools. So that's what we like to talk about, is how do you hedge? The risk management products that I love, I was thinking about this today. Why do I love them so much? Is that they do guarantee some bottom line minimum returns, so you can't lose things. And they do use bonds for that, actually. But then they capture upside potential with options, right? So that you can kind of still have some of that best of both worlds. And that's just one tool. The conceptual basis of these things is finding things that aren't only always chasing upside and always thinking everything's always going to go great, because that's just how you get off the cliff. My brother used to call it like the lemmings. Yes. They all go in one direction and no one's thinking. And that, by the way, is what they rely on you doing. They want you to do that. So they're not going to go out of their way to tell you anything else.
Well, and Jennifer, you bring up such a beautiful point as to why Wealthwise as a show has come to be, because we have watched all the lemmings. We have watched since 2021 with the herding of individuals into the market. Like when, we have The Wealthy Barber here in Canada. It was a book that was written, financial planning. Great. The guy's done, very cool things. But the concept was that you don't have to have, 6-figure income to become wealthy. The problem is when your barber starts giving you tech stock advice, you need to get out of the tech stock space. And there is not a single person in the market right now that doesn't know the intricacies of what NVIDIA is doing next earnings cycle. That is a bubble. That is going to pop. There is a problem there. And that's where I think, with what you do at Quantum Insurance Services, and I think that's why this is such a cool, relationship that we have here with doing this show, is that I can go a little bit off the hinge of like Chicken Little. We are in trouble. but you come with such a calming influence, and we've done it with our financial fitness shows. But you are truly planning people's generational wealth for their families, the generations to come. And what does that look like? How are you helping these people? Because again, it's scary out there.
You have to learn how to think outside the box. I have long wondered why the stock market had such like a hold. Why is it what they announce every single day on the radio? Like the S&P is here. When I was a kid, I was like, why does anybody care about this? Now I understand. It's because it's the easiest way for other people to make money off your money.
Yeah.
So that's why they really like to kind of herd everybody in that direction, because you have to go through either Vanguard, at least direct, or through somebody who's going to be your RIA, who's going to take an additional 2% off of,
right.
But all those fees get funded into their passive income off of you giving them your money and not diversifying. So yeah, my area has always been about diversification. It's about risk management, which is doing things the opposite way, not thinking everything's going to go great, but assuming that the worst could happen, making sure you'll be okay if that happens, and then finding upside even within that, right? And so we solve backwards with math and statistics. It's very easy for us because we use mortality and morbidity rates, which is actual data. So it's not even guesswork for us, right? And that's only one piece of the puzzle. I mean, obviously you work with quantum, and then we do your insurance, we do your life insurance, your infinite banking, your disability protection, we do employee benefits. And I'm still, when I'm in conversations with people all day long, talking about, well, where are you in real estate? Do you own your home yet? Are you positioning to try to buy? Here in the US, it's pretty tough right now. So we have conversations around that. Or if they have a home, have you refinanced? Where are you in terms of your debt? There's all these things that go into the puzzle, how you keep more of your money instead of just thinking it's all about handing it to one sector. And then I understand, Patrick, you do a lot with real estate, don't you?
Right. Yeah. So I've got a number of multifamily properties that I have here in Canada. And, in one of our conversations before, when we were talking about the thesis of what we were trying to do with wealthwise, is that you guys in the States, Canada is in way worse situation. Like when we look back here in the history, when it's all written, Canada probably has been in a recession since last September. And it's going to take us 18 to 24 months for that to all shake out. But we have saw valuations of real estate in Canada double in the last 5 years, literally 100%.
Yeah,
It's crazy, right? Yeah. Well, especially where you are. And what is the temperature there today? We are a little bit humid. Yeah,
76 degrees, I believe. But I wouldn't know because I don't go out unless it's 68 to 72 degrees. It's
that California lifestyle, I tell you, such hard life, right?
We pay for it in taxes, though.
But see, okay, so there's a great example, right? So we just had legislation that's passing right now that is looking at a 66% capital gains tax on primary residences. So when we start looking at our taxes, I'll trade you the weather. So
66%?
Wild, right?
So, is that in addition to your do you have state taxes like we have California state and federal? Do you get like the California is 60? I mean, Canada is 66, and then the province also taxes you?
So we won't so I'm in Ontario, so we will not see the provincial tax on that. We will have a municipal tax that will be put on that as well. You will also have, so our capital gains works, they had a $250,000 limit. I'm going to divulge a little bit here because, we've got some Canadian listeners, we've got some American listeners. So there used to be a $250,000 capital gains exemption. So you used to be able to walk in anything over $250,000 on your property. You walk away and say, thank you very much. I'll take that and put it in my pocket. Now, primary residence was excluded from that. That was, hey, you have paid your taxes. That's after money. Away you go. So that's cottage, that's rental properties. That's all these things. So what they've done now is that they are now going after the capital gains because we've seen 100% increase in property values in the last 5 years.
Okay.
The issue is, and I don't have a problem with taxation, right? At the end of the day, when my accountant says I owe X dollars for taxes, I sort of put that as a bit of a, prideful moment where I go, had a good year, right? I can pay my due.
That's very Canadian of you.
That's very Canadian. I know. It's awful. James is rolling his eyes because he's like, that is such horse shit. I know he's saying that in the background, right? But at the end
on the record.
Right, on the record, yeah. Canada Revenue Agency, if you guys are listening, I always love paying. I love seeing you every year. Yeah.
Me too. I look forward to it every year.
Yeah. But now when you're looking at this, there's a lot of people over COVID, our aged demographic. And this goes both sides. This is Canada, United States. There is a tale of two economies. We are in a tale of two economies. You have independently wealthy individuals that are 55, 60 years old. They have next to no debt or are levered appropriately for the residual values that they're bringing in. Okay. Their debt is paying them a residual. They own property that, they're not levered on their individual residential home themselves. Maybe they've got some, they've bailed the kids out, but it's all manageable debt loads. The alternative to that is that you have young people that are trying to lever into $1 million property. The average house in Canada, the real estate values are upwards of $800,000, $750,000 to $800,000.
Wow.
That's wild.
Everywhere?
Everywhere.
Even in the boondocks, kind of like not just
the average price across Canada. You used to be able to go to the East Coast in Canada and do very well on property. You could go out there under $100,000 buy oceanfront property. That has totally been eradicated over the last 7 years. Gone. It is wild what we're seeing. So now the government steps in with all of the incentives that they've had for prices to continue going up, artificially low interest rates here in Canada. We are the first G7 country to cut rates last week in our process here with the Canadian Federal Reserve Bank. We are the first one, and everyone's celebrating. And I go, they are not cutting for good reasons. They are cutting for terrible reasons. And they are warning that we are in a real estate bubble that is about to pop. The Federal Reserve of Canada is telling you this. Europe, we're seeing elections out of France. We're seeing Germany. We're seeing these, quote unquote, far right elections that are going on in Europe. You're going to see Europe when, again, 18 months from now, 24 months from now, Europe will have been in a recession this entire time. We are not seeing the growth. We are not seeing movement moving forward. But with this capital gains problem, you can't tax plan for it. It's done. They're going to sign it into law. It's going to be choked down your throat. And how do you tax plan? You're going to see lots of people go to trusts.
Yeah.
And the issue with that is that now wait till they start going after the taxation on trusts. It's a process. They have to go after one after one after one after one. And then what do you do as far as corporate taxes? It's wild. Canada is in a really tough position right now. And that's why you got to be watching Wealthwise, because we're talking about it. We're having those conversations, but it'll be an interesting one over the next 24 months. Canada
my takeaway from all of that is I could buy a property in Canada if Trump gets elected for around $1 million at very low interest rate. So that's maybe my plan B. I was going to go to Portugal, but instead I might go to Canada because then I get free healthcare at least in the package for my 66%. Just making a mental note in case. So
there is beautiful real estate. My neighborhood is selling like hotcakes right now. It's sort of wild to watch.
I'm you can do this from like the same room, actually.
That's right. We can get the joint camera going. But James is always a cheerleader for Canada, and I am a little bit different. I don't think Trump is going to be scary. I don't think a second term of Trump is going to be as problematic as people think. But I also think what we're seeing, and this goes back to what we're talking about on the bond movement, we're seeing Janet Yellen front load debt. That to me is terrifying. So she's taking short-term bonds and selling the bejesus out of them, which is dropping yields in the short term, which is stimulating the market, right? So when we have these yields she's selling, 6-month bonds, you can get a 6-month bond for 5%.
Yeah.
We talk about GameStop. GameStop got all this money, all this liquidity from this last little pump. If they bought a 5% bond, they would literally erase their business losses for the year.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy. They're a bankrupt company, but because they had so much stimulus, it's wild. My concern with the Trump piece moving on is that we have been stimulating since November through the Treasury with the bond offerings, and we've been tightening on the Fed. Okay, so banks find themselves in this really cantankerous situation where they can't get out of it. And I could pull up another chart here, and it is your community banks. They're getting slaughtered.
Oh, they're not going to exist anymore. I was actually with First Republic Bank, and they got bought by Chase. I was mad.
Right.
I was so mad.
But so you as a small business owner, you can go there, and they were much more willing to provide liquidity. right? You can go in and get
night and day. It was night and day. And it was just, they were, there's going to end up, I don't believe that small banks are going to continue to exist in the US. I personally don't think, maybe a little bit here or there, community, local within certain, but I think the trend overall is banks have been playing around too long with games they shouldn't be playing around with.
Yep.
The fact that they leverage the assets that they are supposed to be, keeping safe, and they leverage them the way they do. They never had any business doing that. They never should have been doing that to begin with. Yep. There's some dangerous trends. I saw a really great, I'll share it maybe in the chat after all this. It was this great guy talking about shame on the banks for how they've been acting, because they're not supposed to act like the stock market. The stock market is supposed to be where all your risk goes. If you want to play high risk, it's the mosh pit. The bank should not be the mosh pit. I'm a big believer in separation of church and state in that 100%. Way. I like my risk organized.
Where I can touch it.
Yeah. I want to know where my high risk is, where's my low risk, and everything in between. And by the way, that reminds me of something I want to say to all you who are joining us. We want to talk about things that you also want to talk about. We want to know what's on your mind. What are you thinking about? Obviously, you can see there's a world of colors we can touch on as we start to all talk together, think for ourselves, and get wealthwise. So if you've enjoyed this and you have a question, a burning question on anything at all, it could be crypto, it could be NFTs, it could be the Fed, it could be NASDAQ, whatever it is, please put it in the chat. Let us know so we can address it maybe next time, or in future episodes in real time. We want this to be sort of the cocktail party of where it's okay to talk about money, I guess, where it's okay to even talk about politics a little bit, and you're allowed to disagree politely, and no one's going to get into a brawl. Maybe Absolutely. That's kind of what we're doing. We're breaking all the rules.
That's it. Well, but I think that's such a perfect way to end it, to be honest with you, for this episode. You said exactly what I was hoping you would wrap it up with, because again, this show is going to be successful based on our viewers and people liking, subscribing, and sharing this. And Jennifer, again, I thank you so much for joining me with this. I am so excited for the next couple of episodes of this. You bring such a beautiful way of thinking about this. And you've created generational wealth for all of your customers, and you continue to do it for people being able to click, like, subscribe, and share and learn a little something. I love it. I appreciate you, and thank you.
Patrick, likewise, James, for all the magic you do behind the scenes. Thank you. And thank you everyone who's decided to join us for this, to become more wealthwise together. Obviously, you can see it lights us up, and we hope it lights you up. Stay wealthwise, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Let's make some money together, folks.
If you want to learn how to actually diversify and not just live in the same old matrix of outdated financial tools, reach out to Quantum Insurance Services. We'll help make you sovereign to your wealth and provide grounded advice on action steps you can take so your money and your loved ones stay secure, no matter what else goes on in the financial world. Reach out to us at www.quantuminsuranceservices.com and fill out an inquiry form to get started. Our team brings a personal touch to everything we do and truly looks forward to helping you become more wealth-wise.